Cheers!
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 So, Simon Sensei, we have another guest.
Another one, yes.
Another guest.
Coming.
So this is Sal Balahi, and you are in. Well, rather than Sal, rather than me kind of try to kind of mispronounce names of where you are and what you're doing, why don't you introduce yourself? Who are you? Where do you come from? And what do you do?
Thank you. I'm Sal Balahi. I am a Shotokan stylist here in Central Illinois. So we're in Champaign-Urbana. I run a small dojo here, just a few blocks from my house. Our dojo's been around for about 30 years or so, but I do karate. I also do Kobudo. Been doing both for maybe a little over 20 years or so. And I'm sort of a big into just studying human movement. I do a lot of yoga, climbing, steel mace training. So I really enjoy a lot of the supplemental training that sort of helps my karate progress. And that's sort of really where a lot of my focus is lately, is particularly during the past year of the pandemic. I've kind of just become obsessed with studying, becoming more efficient at how I move in anything that I do. But yeah, that's we're not the Shotokan that I do is not, we're not part of any big organization. We're sort of non-affiliated, so we don't have like any JKA ties or things like that. So sort of just a one-off school. But yeah, that's what we do.
So how long have you been training, and what's the you said that your dojo's been around for a long time. What's the lineage? Because I was watching some of your a reason why I kind of asked that is I was watching you do Niju Shiho today. Mm-hmm. And you do kind of like the old style, like no Yokogeri Kiyagi, no Yokogeri Hikomi, just mm-hmm. like Namiash and then down. Also, interestingly, you like generally speaking, bog standard Niju Shiho nowadays is like after the Agi MP, you're kind of driving in and coming back, and you kind of just blocked and then Yoriash back, which was the old traditional way. So where's that coming from? Apart from
it's a good question, because my sensei, so I joined my dojo when I first moved here to Illinois, which would have been maybe early 2000s. And my sensei at that time was teaching karate, but he was teaching it more with an Aikido flair. So he was an Aikidoka as well. Also he did Kobudo and Jiu-Jitsu and things like that. So he mixed a lot of soft elements in there. But my understanding for our lineage anyway is that his sensei at one point was a student of Oshima. Okay. I don't know for how long or sort of how strong those connections were, but I've always been told like that's sort of where our ties are to Shotokan is we have that connection somehow to Oshima sensei. But in terms of performance, we've always been pretty liberal with sort of how we interpret the kata. So what you saw me do may have been just how I felt like doing it that day. And maybe the next time I do it, it might look a little bit different. I tend to just my kata tends to reflect sort of my mood or, how good I'm feeling or how well I'm moving that day. And so it kind of makes it confusing for students sometimes because they'll say, Sensei, you did that movement differently than the way you showed me. It's like, well, yeah, but don't pay attention to what I'm doing. I'm just doing my own thing right now.
But that's sacrilege. You should be burnt to the stake.
I know.
Things like that.
I know. Yes. The kata police. One of these days they're gonna hunt me down because I did my shuto like this instead of like this in Kankudai or something. It's cool. They're out to get you.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. God, Simon, you're like strangely, Simon always like just starts off and starts asking questions, but he's been rather quiet.
Well, I've been listening because I was interested because I don't know you that well, Sal. And I've been watching you, and the Ashima thing was quite interesting as well because Ashima's a big character in America, which I don't know much about. But anyway, what I like about watching you is you're obviously playing with karate.
Yes,
which like we do, and I love the fact you're doing lots of all the people we sort of like and work with. You see lots of us just thinking about sort of little movements at the beginning, and I really like that. But oh, hang on, sorry, it's my dog again. Sorry. How did you get into supplementary training? Because Shotokan, famously doesn't have Hojo Undo like Okinawan karate does. I mean, did
Yeah.
you ever experiment with the Chi-Ishi and Nirigami? And so
No.
how was your journey to using strange equipment? And maybe as a North American, I often find men in North America often have an old-fashioned weight training background. Did you experiment with those sort of strict lifts and stuff before you got to the more free-flowing, better stuff?
Definitely. So, I mean, I even as a kid, I think, I mean, my father was into weightlifting. So, you know, I sort of naturally got into weightlifting before I ever started karate. So, you know, as a teenager, going to the gym or working out at school or things like that. So I was a traditional weightlifter all the way up through my 30s, I think. And I found that I was just getting injured all the time. Like, it was just, you know, as good as you know, as much as you pay attention to your form and everything, there's just always something. You lift something too heavy, you do something wrong. My back was always getting hurt, and into my mid 30s, I started getting some really, really bad back problems. And you know, and I'd always thought that the weightlifting that I was doing was somehow benefiting my karate. I never knew exactly what the connection was, but I always assumed physical exercise plus karate must be good. I must be doing something, but there really wasn't. There was no strong correlation there. But as I said, in my mid 30s, I had some really bad back problems. They were going to refer me to a neurosurgeon to have surgery as an option to fix whatever I had going on with me. And I didn't really want to do that. I knew that if I had back surgery, that was going to sort of maybe be the end for me in terms of what I wanted to do with karate. And just, I'm a very physical person, so I knew I didn't want to do a surgery that was going to limit me. So I started exploring yoga instead, and went through a very painful 6 to 7 months of just forcing myself to go to yoga daily. And, you know, sometimes I would leave yoga and be in more pain than when I started, but gradually I could feel I was getting stronger and the pain was reducing. And so I got to a point where I was really enjoying the yoga just for the sake of training. And I was starting to see the connection to karate. You know, they have a lot of, yoga focuses a lot on your structure and alignment and moving from your center and, you know, connection with the inner thighs. It's all there. And as I became less focused on the pain that I was in because of my back, as that started getting better, I started seeing, like, you know what, this is probably worth continuing because I'm seeing a really strong relationship to the karate that I'm doing. It's really beneficial. So I've been doing that ever since. Yeah. And in 2015 or 2016, we had a climbing gym open up here locally, and I saw it. I'm like, that looks really cool, so I'm going to try that. So I started climbing, and I've been doing that ever since. And I immediately saw the benefit to karate, because to be a good climber, you have to be relaxed. And it's always interesting watching a new climber climb is kind of like watching a white belt, right? They're using a lot of effort where they really don't need to, and they're gassing themselves out because they're just so stiff and tight and everything. And you watch a new climber and they're gripping on for dear life, and they're using nothing but their biceps to hold themselves on the wall, when really you just want to be able to relax and hang back and, you know, sort of hang by your fascia, and, you know, you trust your core and everything. And so climbing immediately, I'm like, this is also helping my karate. Like, this is building my grip strength. My hikiteis are getting stronger here, and I'm learning to be more relaxed and fluid. Plus the focus that you need to do climbing is very similar to the zanshin that you would have, you know, when you're training. And that, you know, particularly if you're climbing outside 100, 200 feet up in the air, you know, you don't need to be thinking about a whole lot there. You need to be focused on what you're doing, you know, and not worrying about, you know, other things. But about 2 years ago, one of my yoga teachers introduced me to the steel mace. He said he knew I did martial arts, and he himself is a sort of a aficionado of training with weird things and so forth. He said, have you ever worked with a mace? I said, no. So he brought one in one day and he handed it to me. It was a 10-pound mace. He said, well, here you go. Take a look at that. And I flipped it around. I said, oh, this seems interesting. So I got one for myself and just started playing with it. You know, I got on YouTube and found some brief tutorials of some things to try. And I immediately saw that this was sort of the missing piece for me in terms of unlocking just the internal connections that I was very sorely missing from my karate. So, you know, when you're swinging a mace around, you're you've got basically a cannonball on the end of a stick. And so you can't, it's a ballistic exercise. You can't really try to control it with muscles. You have to relax and sort of let everything sort of be connected to your core. And when you do that enough, I was listening to Rick Houghton recently. He does like these little 8-minute videos, and he was just talking about something, because he uses nunchaku, I think, but he uses it more as a tool to just help him relax, it sounds like. And he said something to the effect of, you start to emulate the qualities of the tool. So the fluidness that he was seeing in his nunchaku, he was trying to emulate that in how he performed his karate. And that's what I do with the steel mace and some of the other tools that I use, not just maces, but water bags, ropes. It's having that offset weight on the end of the handle of the mace, your fist starts to feel like that when you're punching, so that the arm stays nice and relaxed. This feels heavy, and it just feels like you're hitting with a piston. And so the more and more that I play with those things, the more I feel that it strengthens just the functionality of the karate that I do, where I sort of strip away, I sort of started to strip away the cosmetic details of my karate, where I don't really care anymore about them. I don't care like if it looks like Shotokan or if it looks like I'm doing Shorin-ryu or something. It's I just care about the functional, how my body's functioning in relation to whatever it is I'm performing. And the more and more that I play with these different tools and just experiment and play, really, it's just, that's what it is. It's going in with no plan. I don't go to the dojo and say, today I'm going to do Kanku Dai 10 times and I'm going to do my side snap kicks this many times. Never have a plan. I just go in, I grab a mace, I grab whatever, and I start moving. And, you know, I'll float around, I'll grab a mace, do that for 10 minutes, then I'll go hit the makiwara, then I'll do some kata, then I'll pick up some kettlebells. And I just sort of do these circuits based on however I'm feeling. And
it's kind of like breaking the form, though, isn't it? Because,
yes.
like, I mean, so when we do weight training, like weight training is sort of almost designed, you know, strict form. People, you're fighting the weight. You're fighting against that weight.
Absolutely.
And most people end up tearing muscles or injuring themselves because it's antagonistic. Me against, I'm going to get this motherfucker and do it.
Yeah.
But when you do it, no, but you know, when you got a mate, I do kettlebell, and you know, and I do round the worlds and swings and stuff. But I mean, you're playing with the weight, aren't you? I'm not actually fighting the kettlebell. I'm trying to control the kettlebell. I'm watching you with the mace again. You know that it looks like really dangerous movements. You're way back here. You're breaking your line, and you know but you're sort of embracing it and mastering it rather than going.
So it reminds me of because I a number of years ago, because I like there's high blood pressure goes through my family. So I was at my doctor's and he was checking my blood pressure and he's like, oh, it's a little bit high, you know, and I already, like, all my family are on medication. He goes, oh, I think we're gonna have to up your medication. I was like, oh, okay. He says, I says, you know, it's just like, I guess it's the busy time. Actually, it was around when Richard threw me out of the WTK, so I was a bit stressed, you know, and so I was like, oh well, maybe you know, like a bit stressed at the moment. And he said to me, he says, Scott, he says, as far as I'm concerned, he says, you do feck all during the day. That good Irish doctor, you know. He says, you do feck all during the day. He says, take up fecking yoga. And so I did. And so I took up yoga. My blood pressure's fine. Don't have to go on some more medication. All's good. And that gets me to the point where, because I took up yoga, I found it really interesting. One of the things that I first heard one of the instructors say was get the position and then strip away effort. Take away effort and hold that position. And I've ever since I thought, I'm going to keep that. When I ever teach karate, you know, like, find your form, take away effort, strip away effort, strip away effort. And it's kind of like a little bit similar to what you're saying, I think, and what Simon's saying about the kettlebell, is that you're not fighting it. And so many people, like you said about the climbers, you know, when I've never seen a beginner climber, but I can absolutely imagine them being exactly the same as a beginner karateka. All effort. You know, and I was teaching last night and we had a couple of beginners in the class. I don't know why my secretary sent beginners to my class, but they did. And I'm not used to teaching beginners, right? But
they're not beginners anymore, Sensei.
Yeah, they're dead. No, they left. No, they're not. But one of the, you know, I was saying to one of the guys, it's like, stop trying. You're like, too much effort into what you're doing. Just relax. And it kind of, I think, speaks to what you're saying, yeah?
Yeah, and I think and it's interesting because with like yoga, for example, I was talking with someone recently, and they said, yeah, I tried yoga, but I didn't like holding the poses. It was boring, and I didn't feel like I was doing anything. I said, well, that's interesting. I said, because, in yoga, the poses, you might be stationary in some of them, but they're active, right? You are engaging, just like we are in karate. I might just be holding my hands here, but I'm squeezing in here and ready to release. So that you are active, but it's not as much effort at all. It's a strange dichotomy.
There's a connection with yoga in England where people always assume it's for old ladies did yoga. Hatha yoga for old ladies. And I mean, I did some hot yoga before the pandemic. It was fantastic, but it's very hard.
It is.
One thing Scott and me do, and I do, is we do slow training. And I think you say this as well, Scott. I often say, if you're finding slow training easy, you're not doing it right. We're squeezing in, going to Shutawuki, compressing, and your legs should be shaking.
Yes.
I mean, it should be like, but I suppose, especially men, we like that false feedback. We want to, people, I think you talk about that relaxed karate. I think people need to go through that process of hard karate before they can get there, because this feels good, but this is boring, isn't it? It's good, but wait a minute. It's nothing. But I think the other point was, this is another question really, but I like, you talk about zanshin and climbing. Again, a lot of people in karate go, karate's Budo, karate's dangerous and stuff. No, climbing's dangerous. I watched YouTube yesterday. There's a great clip of a free climber overtaking a guy on a rope, on a belay, on a rope, yeah? And I just randomly found it. And he must be like 50 feet up on a slab thing. And this guy sees this guy coming, and he's like that, resting, holding onto the rope. And you can see his hand like holding on. And this free climber just comes up, like you said, really smooth. And he had zanshin. He didn't talk to the guy. You could see him really, and he never actually stopped. It was like a kata going up, and he just went ding, 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 and overtook him. And the guy next to him goes, wow. Yeah. But you can see, and that, like you say, that is real zanshin. Because
it is, and you're having to make, when you're doing a climb like that, you're having to make some of the same sort of micro adjustments to what you're doing without much thought. The same way that you might do in sparring. In sparring, you don't want to take the time to be like, okay, they threw an oiski at me. Do I do an agayuke? Do I do?
No mind, no shin.
You should just be able to just adapt to what they're giving you without much thought. And climbing's the same. You want to be able to get to a point where if you're outside climbing, for example, where you don't know what you're reaching for, maybe it's a new route you're doing, you have to be able to have your body adapt to whatever hold is there and be able to move accordingly, just like you would if you were grappling or sparring with someone.
Well, the other thing, if you climb seriously, you have a climber's physique, don't you? And you can tell, if you're a serious climber, you look like a climber. If you're a cyclist, and in karate, I mean, this is a question for both of you really. Is there an ideal physique for karate? I don't think there is, but I just wonder what you think.
That's a good question. I mean, I think it sort of depends. I
don't think there is one, but I just,
I'm gonna flip the question back on you, Simon, because a long time ago, maybe not that long, maybe like a year ago, someone on a Facebook group was quoting you, or at least they said, I'm quoting Simon Bligh, and apparently you had said something. I don't know if this was like at a conference or whatever, but you were reported to have said you have to build a body that is worthy of karate.
Certainly not worthy. No, my line is, I said, you have to. I said, I'm trying to remember the quote. It's something like, it's not worthy of karate. I think you have to have a body fit for purpose. I think I say we have a duty to teach you good karate, and you, the student, you have a duty to make your body fit for purpose. That's what I mean. But I mean,
I've never heard you say that, Simon.
Pardon?
I've never heard you say that. That's fake news.
Yeah, fake news. No, I know. I think I'm famous. In the past, I've had a reputation of being a bit of a body fascist, really, and I'm not. But it's just.
Yeah.
Okay. No. But in terms of, you look at people who are good, like traditionally Japanese senseis are very small and skinny and very good at karate, and then someone like Shina Sensei is a famous JKA guy who's a mesomorph who's fantastic at karate. So I think, like, if you look at track and field, all the 100-meter people are like big, all the long distance people are skinny, long jumpers are tall, shot putters are big. But karate, we sort of is as a you know, American footballers all look the same, you know. So, but karate is that sort of broad church.
Well, can I say like that the thing is that the, you know, like if you think about athletics, then, you know, all sprinters are one type, all blah blah blah, you know, long distance runners are another type, and then you say, okay, so that's a perfect body type for sprinting or long distance. But actually, if you just take it as athletics, like I want to be athletic, and then it's a whole load of body type, right?
Sure.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it's not that. It's like everyone trying to be a 100-meter sprinter. And the point I'm trying to make is that an awful lot of people, like you said, Simon, an awful lot of people, they look at Japanese, certainly the original Japanese instructors, who generally were small and small in stature, and they try to emulate that karate.
Yeah.
You know, and they go, oh, I'm just not the right body type. Rather than, and that's like someone who's long and skinny, tall and skinny, trying to be a 100-meter sprinter, and just like, oh, I just don't have the body type. No, everyone has a body to be athletic. Everyone has a body to be karate, but you've got to find your own karate, right?
That's a good answer.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something I talk with my students a lot. Yeah, where they'll watch me do something. And they say, I just don't think I can get my body to do it. I'm like, well, we can get there for you. You know, you're not my size. We're not the same height. You know, there's going to be some adjustments that maybe you have to make, whether that's making a technique work. If we're doing like throws or something, if I've got a student who's this tall and a student who's this tall, they're going to have to do very different things to make that technique work. And I think as long as you're making space for those types of adjustments, you know, I've certainly seen karate where you have to do it exactly the way the sensei said, or you're doing it wrong. And there's no liberties at all for making adaptations based upon your physiological differences or whatever. And I think that can be a problem. But, you know, I think, you know, my goal is to help students be able to use karate for themselves to sort of make it their own. I don't want them to look like me. I want them to be able to make the karate functional.
I think you use this great phrase, don't you, called building the engine. Is that you?
Yes.
I mean, could you explain about, I mean, it really resonated with me, but if you explain what building the engine is then.
Yeah, it's anymore. I think as this past pandemic, or this past year has shown for me anyway, is that the more time that I spend more time on Hojo Undo than anything. So I probably train about 20 hours a week total. Only about, I don't know, 6 hours of that is probably karate training. The rest is yoga, kettlebells, steel mace, climbing. I spend more time on these activities that support my karate than actually doing karate. And my karate continues to improve as a result. And, you know, I think it goes back to, you know, you can sit there and do, you know, oiski, you know, 110,000 times in the mirror, and that's great. You're building that muscle memory. But if you're not addressing the actual internal pieces of that, you know, if you're punching with your shoulder every time you do that, you're just sort of, it's not that practice.
There's no feedback there, is there?
Yes, exactly.
But if you're swinging a mace round, there's an awful lot of feedback.
You're getting that feedback.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You're absolutely getting that feedback. You become very aware of where your center of gravity is. So, you know, when you start incorporating some of the different stances from karate with the steel mace, it accentuates, or it amplifies that awareness of where you're standing or how you're positioning your center of gravity for maybe your kokutsudachi or your zenkutsudachi. And then when you're not holding the mace, you find that feeling much quicker. You're like, okay, that's where that is. I can feel that. I can make that shape easier, or I can replicate that feeling much easier without the prop in my hands. And yeah, we do the same in yoga. Yoga will use different props, blocks, and so forth to help you feel something or get, you know, establish a particular connection. And so I try to do that more now with my karate, even when I'm teaching. So if I see a student struggling to get, you know, a particular concept, or, you know, they're not feeling something, I'll say, hold on, and I might go grab a mace, or I'll grab an elastic band, or I'll grab a Bosu ball or something. So, okay, I want you to try the same technique, but I want you to stand on this thing, or I want you to, you know, hold this thing, and then they can feel it like, oh, that's where that is. And then it's trying to help them find that feeling repeatedly, you know, without the prop later. But yeah, that's sort of what I mean by building the engine. It's just, the only thing that I work on is just efficiently moving from my center. I really try not to stress about anything else with my karate. I don't worry about what my sochin looks like or my hangetsu. Like, you know,
If you're moving from the center, it's probably pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It is. So it's just a simplified way of looking at things, I guess. Instead of, I used to stress out so much about, oh God, my Konkudai looks like shit, and I'm screwing up this part. My back stance doesn't feel right, and my punches, my shoulders still coming up. Like all that stuff is sort of gone now, and now I just really worry about, am I moving from my center? Great. That's all that's all that matters to me. Everything else just sort of falls into place after that.
Cool. So where would you be getting influence from, do you think? Like who do you like? Because very few people kind of talk about, well, actually I was going to say very few people talk about moving from the center as being the main goal. That's probably not true, but there's very few people that actually do it, if you know what I mean. So where are you kind of drawing inspiration from in order to kind of come up with new ideas, or is it just purely internal?
A lot of it's internal now, anyway. But I mean, prior to even the last couple of years, I was getting lots of my inspiration. So my sensei, I trained with my sensei for only about 7 years. So like I said, I started my dojo about 2000. He sort of retired or stepped away from formal teaching around 2007. And then I was sort of on my own. I have not had a formal sensei since then. I've been fortunate to work with some really great karateka during that time. So David Gimberline, I don't know if you know him. He's from Minnesota. So he's someone that I was introduced to around 2005, and he's been great at giving me feedback on things. So that was always one of his big things, was moving from center. And he really, when I first worked with him, pointed out just how much of that I was missing. And I was sort of the big fish in the little pond in my tiny dojo here. I was sort of the only Shodan, and thought I knew all of it. And he came around one day, and I realized I had a lot to learn. So I've sort of taken some of those initial interactions with him and just continued to build upon them. And then I keep looking for those sorts of pieces all over. So I've spent a lot of time, Scott Sensei, watching you over the years, Rick Houghton, Steve Ubel. I sort of look at everybody and sort of see what is it that they're doing that they have in common. And is that, and how can I sort of start emulating that? But but anymore nowadays, it's more just it's a lot of internal, motivation just to keep building on whatever this is. I don't really know where I'm going with this type of training that I'm doing. I don't know where it's going to take me. I know I enjoy it, and it seems to be fruitful so far. But
where do weapons fit into this then? Where does your weapon training? How did you come onto that? Are you self-taught on that, or did you have a teacher for that?
So my same sensei, yeah. So when I joined my dojo, he was my Kobudo and my karate sensei. So the Kobudo that we do is it's sort of a blend of Mariyoshi and Ryukyu Kobudo. So it's a very, very kata heavy system. So I did my Shodan under him. And I've just continued. I took over teaching the class, so I've been teaching the Kobudo class in his absence ever since then. So I've been doing it for a while now. But it's just like the mace and all the other tools I use. My Kobudo now is just an extension of my karate. So the way I move the bow, the way I'm moving with sai, I try to emulate the feeling of that tool in my hand when I'm using it. And I care more about I care less about, do I know what the applications are to this move, and more about, am I moving efficiently?
Would you recommend Kobudo for all karateka?
I think so. I think there's a lot of, I don't know, there's that old stereotype like karateka should never lift weights because you're going to get slow. And there's the other one where, you should never touch a weapon unless you have a black belt in karate first. And we don't do that. Like we've always offered Kobudo as a separate syllabus. It's a separate class. It has its own ranking system and everything. And I have plenty of students who have never taken a karate class in their life, but they do Kobudo. And certainly you're going to have a lot of advantages over, if you have a karate background, you're going to have some advantages if you take up Kobudo, because you sort of already know the stances, and you've sort of got a lot of you've got a good foundation to build upon. But it's not impossible for people to step into Kobudo who've never thrown a maigeri or something like that. They've got a few extra hurdles to get over, but it works well.
What benefits does it give a Shotokan karateka?
I think depending on the weapon you're using. So for example, the bow, which is what we start teaching first, it's very hard to get good at the bow if you are stiff and sort of muscle arming everything. And when the bow will start to help teach you to relax more, and that's something that will absolutely benefit any karateka, not just a Shotokan person, but that's usually one of the first things I start to notice is if I have a student from a karate class come and try Kobudo, particularly if they are pretty stiff, they'll be moving the bow real stiff like that, but later on they start to relax a little more, and then you can start to see that reflected in their karate as well. And for me, that's the biggest benefit that I can think of is just you learn to relax and learn that there's more than one way to move, and you can't, if you're real stiff and you got heavy sai in your hands or an nunchaku or something, like that's not a sustainable way to keep moving your body, because you're going to gas out pretty quick when you have those extra implements in your hands.
Good, yeah, good.
Yeah.
So can I go back to you? So you talked about the when you were climbing about kind of using the fascia. So I've had plenty of discussions about the fascia over the years. Like one of my students is a like a surgeon, he works for one of the best kind of sporting hospitals, or the best sporting hospital in Ireland, and he's like, fascia is nonsense. It doesn't exist. Like it doesn't exist in any sort of way that can affect karate. He's a black belt of karate. Steve Ubel, absolutely the same opinion.
Really?
Doesn't work. It's not nothing. So now I've argued my points with them, but tell me what your thoughts are on the fascia.
So having no sort of professional background myself in physiology or anything like that, I sort of
let that stop you.
Yeah, I think I used that term. I used the term fascia to mean that when teaching karate, I think we use the term relax too often, and it's when students hear that all the time, like you need to relax more, you need to relax more, you need to relax more, and that doesn't help the student at all. They think relaxation means without tension, so they have to sort of go limp, and that's not what it means, right? It means you have to have tension sort of in the right places, and that's what I mean by when I say we're climbing with our fascia. It means that, I mean, yes, when I'm hanging from this thing, I have to keep enough tension in my arm and connection to everything else that I don't fall off the wall, but I'm not just hanging there limp. So where there's that balance. So for me, when I say you're using your fascia, it's using just the right amount to do the job without sort of overexerting yourself. And that's a hard thing to measure and explain. It's certainly a hard thing for beginners to understand. You have to sort of feel it and develop that ability over time. So that's sort of how I interpret it. But I'm sure that's opinions vary, right?
Yeah. I think like so often in like I use the bridge of I use the analogy of a bridge. Like you have like two types of ways of making a bridge. The first basic way is to have the building blocks, and you build a bridge with a keystone in the middle, and people kind of often see their body like the building blocks of a bridge. Where you have the skeleton, the one bone next to it, like just kind of structure of a skeleton. Whereas actually, there's another way of building a bridge, and that's a suspension bridge, where nothing's really actually touching, and it's held in suspension. And really, that's a much better analogy to the human body, because, of course, if bones start touching, that's when things go wrong. Absolutely. Like every single bone is held in suspension away from other bones. And I think for me, like when I talk to kind of people who say, oh, the fascia isn't really kind of helping in any way. Well, it's a bit like saying that the tension within the steel girders or the steel wiring of a suspension bridge isn't really doing anything. But the fact that it's held in tension means that there's potential there all the time. And that's how I see it. And therefore, if there's, I see my body as a web of fascia. And by affecting one part of that web, it will naturally have consequences for the other part. And I think if you did it that way, you end up seeing karate purely by its parts, so mechanically that it gets boiled down to its individual parts. When actually, if you use the body as a whole, it can be so much more.
Absolutely. You put it much better than I did, Sensei. Yeah, I've been reading a little bit, and I haven't read enough to really to speak authoritatively on it. But a term called I'm probably mispronouncing it, tensegrity is sort of that term of describing those connections of, you know, as you described with the bridge there. But, you know, when we're holding a punch out and we're talking about the connections that we have here down to the inner thighs. I mean, that's when I'm standing in a stance, I feel like I'm standing on my inner thighs. I'm not standing on my feet. I'm balancing on my inner thighs and moving that way. And that's, I would call it, you know, that's how I look at the fascia and everything. It's those internal connections, just as you described.
Simon often says, as I was saying, it's like, you know, don't be on your stance, be in your stance.
Yes.
And it's like that connection, isn't it? Like, so your fascia, there's crisscrossing networks, and it's like being kind of sucked into your stance through your center and like holding in by the inner thigh muscles.
Absolutely. I think it's because karate is a holistic movement. Often when we teach, you know, we often talk about hips maybe too much. And I've done this. You show people shomen hame, and they get obsessed with that, but that's all they do. So I don't know, that like the feet could be all over the place, the toes are up, the shoulders are up, but look, I'm moving my hips.
Yep.
You know, and it's a bit like, and another thing, and another thing, and another thing. You know, and it's much better rather than breaking it down, is to do it holistically, I think. Because otherwise there's a huge list of things you have to do.
Exactly. And that's where, you know, to take it back to using things like kettlebells and maces, because in those things, when you put something heavy in your hands like that and you hold it out in front of you, like your body automatically starts to adjust to holding that load.
You feel your back straight away, don't you? And your posture.
Absolutely.
Kettlebell swings I do a lot. And then when I started using the 24 for the first time, I was losing my balance, overbalancing. It was a really good teacher, and it made me sink into my stance more. I mean, very simple. Once you're chucking stuff, you know, trying to control stuff or playing with stuff, it really teaches you a lot of lessons, doesn't it?
It does. And I think more and more I've found that a lot of these more complex, harder to teach things in karate, it's easier for students to grasp them when we look outside of karate, when we look at, you know, whether it's kettlebells or some other physical activity.
Tube training. And the first time I did tube training with Scott, I'd never done it before, and I thought I'd be good at this. Shoulder up, and like we did hundreds, you know. And then suddenly, it's a great teacher, isn't it? Because you know, if your shoulder hurts and you're doing 100 Gaikuzuki, you're doing them wrong, and you have to drop everything down. And really good training, you know. They just and you know, hitting a bag is a really good one, isn't it? Especially for karate people or makiwara. It's like, you know, straight away. Sometimes people can move in the hips, but they're holding their fist strong. Or, I think you definitely need, you know, training in fresh air is like is the weakness of Shotokan, isn't it?
Absolutely, and you know, and that was really that was the thing that was challenging over the pandemic, right? I mean, training virtually and finding ways for students to get that feedback when you're not there to actually physically, you know, push on their hands or test their stance or anything. And so, you know, I found that we used, I would try to help students find things within their house that they could use during class that would help them, you know, because I wasn't there to help to push on them, you know, go find, you know, a broomstick, go get a broomstick. We're going to try this or something, and try to find different ways so that they could get that feedback on their own without me or without being in the dojo where they could punch the makiwara or something like that.
I think it's really good when you find, like, when you want to kind of improve a certain kind of, I don't know, a physical element of karate, and then you try to find an exercise that is outside of karate, because then as soon as people think they're doing karate, they have that kind of emotional baggage. I'm doing karate
hat on.
I have to do this. Whereas if you take it away from karate and just try to do something else, and I often say, like, get that feeling, right? You got that feeling. Okay, now put that feeling into your karate. But it's so hard when people kind of have this mental kind of image of what they should be doing that completely affects their physicality.
Same, you know, with kumite drills, you do kumite with people, with kids and stuff, and when they start, we're going to do kumite, they're trying to hit each other. But I do this drill, you got to touch their feet, you got to touch your partner's feet. And suddenly you're playing a game, the energy's going down, they're smiling, they're laughing, they're trying to win, they don't win, they're not bothered, you know, and then touch the shoulder. And then now we do kumite.
Yep.
Another one with kumite is getting them to have a conversation. So just doing kumite, moving about, but also talking. Say, how are you doing? What have you been doing today? Oh, how was that? Tell me about, you know, what music do you like? And you'll often find people kind of punctuating their speech. I love you. Go to the cinema. You know, that kind of thing. No, hang on a minute. Just have a conversation. And as soon as they get into that, then they start to flow and relax and move, and you go, right, that's what you want to have in your kumite all the time. So yeah, trying to take them out of the karate mentality is probably sometimes the most beneficial thing.
I think that's taking out a karate mentality is a really good thing to remember. I mean, yeah, really useful as a teaching aid. It's really, really good.
I think
Teaching
it is,
karate by stealth.
Yeah, I think it is, but at the same time, there's, I more and more I've started to see that, because you always hear the thing that karate should be part of your daily life and live it every day and everything, and I think that means different things to different people. But back when I was having my really bad back problems and I was seeing a series of chiropractors, I had one chiropractor who was watching me move, and he says, "You're not bracing your core at all." He said, "You should always be bracing your core." He says, "You're picking up something real light, brace your core. You're going to get your coffee, brace your core. Always be bracing, 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 bracing." And at the time, I was like, yeah, whatever. I don't get it. But I do it now. I'm never not bracing my core.
It's like pelvic floor, isn't it? It's like, pelvic floor is really important.
Yep. I mean, even right now, I'm standing on a balance. You can't really see it, but I'm standing on a balance board right now because just as I'm working, I will be sitting here because I'm, rocking side to side. And, I'm always doing, my karate is sort of part of everything that I do every day. When I'm walking my dogs and my dogs start pulling to go after a squirrel, I'm engaging my center. So they don't pull my arm this way, but I stay nice and connected, and they run like they can't go anywhere, but I just stay nice and calm. So I sort of make it part of my every part of my life. And, when your sensei is saying you need to straighten up more, well, they don't mean don't just straighten up more in the dojo, straighten up all the time. You should always be aware of your posture and how you're carrying yourself, not just when you're doing your kata or when you're doing this particular movement in the dojo. It should always be a thing. And then it becomes easier to do when you make it part of your everyday and everything that you do. It just becomes easier.
I'm gonna sing my own praises now, but I once a friend of mine, he does karate, and he said, "Oh, I saw you at the airport yesterday. I just landed from somewhere, and I was coming out of departures and going to get my car." I was like, "Oh yeah." He said, "I've never seen anybody walk through the airport like that before." I was like,
in your dress?
No, running away from the security.
Sorry,
but like he said you just kind of went through the airport. I was like, I just left departure, went and got my car. And he's like, yeah, but he says it was different. I was like, oh, it's probably one of the nicest compliments I've ever had. Just kind of, you're just holding yourself, kind of walk, like rather than kind of, as people do.
I think, when you say yoi to people, it tells you everything about the karate, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Just going yoi, you get everything from like yoi. We can judge people, can't we? In a black belt grade, we have to go yoi, kidambarai, and we kind of know who's going to pass or not.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Absolutely.
That could be the black belt test, really.
Yeah. And there was do you know Konishiki, the sumo? Konishiki. Dumchuk, yeah, he was a Hawaiian guy, one of the biggest sumo practitioners back in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s.
Yokozuna, I saw him.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I mean it's massive. But he, when they kind of come together and they kind of fake get ready, and they don't start and they go back and throw the salt. Yeah. So he never stood up. He just kind of stayed on his haunches and
looked right
up at the guy. And normally they wouldn't do that. Normally they would kind of show their size by standing up, but he would intimidate people just by staying down. And he had such zanchin, such control that he's like, next time I'm going to kill you, kind of thing.
But interesting, I've got a book about him called Gaijin Yokozuna. Okay. And he basically trained at the sumo Beihei thing, and he got a Canadian sports scientist to coach him. And straight away he said, stop doing sumo training, just like you say, Sal. Straight away he said, because in the sumo idea was you trained really hard before a basho, and the day before you did the hardest session, and then your next day you're competing. And he tapered his training, changed his diet, he lost a little bit of weight, got him doing like calisthenics, deadlifting, some weightlifting, and all the sumo people went mad because it's disrespectful to sumo. And possibly sports psychiatrist he said, you don't have to stand up, just stay there. So he basically broke the rules of sumo and became the first gaijin yokozuna.
Yeah.
Oh wow!
By doing less sumo.
Yeah.
It was also very similar to Kagawa Sensei's yoi. Kagawa Sensei, like back in the I don't know, mid 80s, late 80s, when he was kind of winning everything. You know, most people would be doing the big, you know, yoi, both in Kumite and Kata. And Kagawa Sensei was the first kind of just like to, just
it was almost insolent, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, he was kind of, I think he was criticized.
I think he was. Yeah, he looked a bit cocky.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what he wanted to look like, because he's going to win.
Yeah, but he wasn't cockiness. It was just.
So it looked that way.
Yeah, he exuded confidence, and obviously arrogance, and you know, arrog comes from land of confidence. You know, like that arrogance, but it's just confidence, pure confidence.
It's being a winner as well.
To do this kind of thing, yeah.
Because I mean, all that is the theatre of it all, you know, as well. You know?
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool.
But I mean, natural movement. It's always natural. Natural movement wins, doesn't it?
It does.
You know.
So Sal, your future in karate, what do you have planned? Where are you heading, or are you just enjoying the journey?
Yeah, I'm kind of in a weird place. Yeah, I'm really enjoying the training that I do. I'm glad our state is now sort of reopened up a bit, so we've now been able to go back to training more like we did pre-pandemic, where we can start doing more partner work and things like that. So that's been nice. But you know, really the whole pandemic was sort of a renaissance for me in terms of my own training, and now I'm trying to I'm grappling with sort of, what do I do with this now? Where do I take this? You know, I'm now. Tomorrow we'll be starting our first teaching some steel mace classes at the dojo. So, you know, just trying to formally teach this as a fitness class. So I'm hoping to do some more with that, and to try and help, you know, anybody who, you know, who wants to learn about the steel mace, or just wants to learn to move better. And I'm still sort of trying to figure out what this all looks like. I don't really know where it's going right now. I've never had, I don't really have any aspirations for rank or things like that. So like I said, you know, we're just sort of a small unaffiliated dojo. So we have what we have, and that's it. That's fine. But yeah, I don't really know. I'm just sort of enjoying the ride right now.
I mean, one thing I was saying, looking at you, is, you know, the Kali, any Indian martial arts, they have the clubs. Have you seen all the Indian stuff? I mean, I find there's a really good connection there with yoga and going back. You know, Scott talks about going back to the roots of martial arts. But the stuff they do lots of, you know, the crocodile, they call it, and the Indian clubs, and I think they do some big sword stuff as well.
That's where the mace comes.
That'd be really interesting, yeah.
Yeah, the mace comes from India, so they call it,
doesn't it? Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
they call it a gada, Gada. I may be mispronouncing that. It's typically longer than what you might have seen me use in videos. It's got a much longer handle. And they usually just stick to the traditional 360 swing. But yeah, all the old Indian wrestlers, I mean, they've been using it for centuries.
Well, yeah, I used to do Hindu squats. I still do Hindu squats. You know, I do it in my dojo. It's 100 Hindu squats we do. And it's a really good, it's just a great exercise for everybody. Everybody should do Hindu squats.
What's a Hindu squat, Simon?
Hindu squats is you're on your ball of your feet, your heels are touching. And you go down and you come up. I'll show you next. I'll just Google Hindu squats. But I mean, you know, Hindu wrestlers, Indian wrestlers will do like 1,000 of them.
Yeah.
And all their training is totally holistic. The only weights are Indian clubs and the mace, like Sal said, and they do lots of body weight stuff. And you know, I used to get, you know, the crocodile. You do the crocodile, don't you? Yeah. You know, I mean, you know, and but the Hindu squats are just basically a really simple way, a safe way to do squats, creating a rhythm, and it also makes you breathe right. Really, really good. Really good. And they've got great legs.
They do.
Like, you know,
they do.
Yeah.
So Sal, your website is stillmacekarate.com, is that right?
Yes.
Yes, so people can look at what you do there, and I think you've got a YouTube channel as well, yeah.
Yep. I think I'm still working on getting everything sort of under one name, but yeah, I think the YouTube channel's Functional Karate and Kobudo. You know, prior to the pandemic and me sort of going down this rabbit hole of functional training, you know, I was more focused on just the practical application of my kata, which I still love to do. I do some work with Koryu Chinadi with Patrick McCarthy when I can, and so I really love the 2-person drills and the application studies with that. Will always love that stuff. But you know, right now, like I said, I'm kind of down this rabbit hole of the functional training and that sort of thing. So that's sort of taken my attention. But yeah, the functional karate and Kobudo is my my YouTube channel.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said like the pandemic has been like a renaissance, and I think you're kind of right. I think there's a lot of people who have, well, I mean, apart from the whole pandemic element of an illness of COVID,
Sure.
just the lockdown. I think some people have really blossomed, and some people haven't.
Sure.
And what's I think what it has done in many ways is been an accelerant to people's journey, right? And so people who had something about them and a little bit kind of like kind of sharp and being on a journey, they've had time to kind of focus on that journey. And people who aren't doing that have just kind of like I don't know, been hidden away for a year. So yeah, I wish you luck in your journey, and I hope to see you next time I'm in America.
Oh yeah, thanks so much. This has been a pleasure, and yeah, I look forward to the next time you're in this area. Maybe if you're over doing a seminar with Kevin Downer's group again, maybe I'll try and make my way over there.
Yeah. So Simon, we're coming up to an hour. So any last questions, Simon?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking, I mean, is there anyone or any system or person you'd like to train with or have a go at? Or, I suppose system for you. I mean, would you be interested in like doing Okinawan Hoji Undo, like, you know, Chi-Ishi and Origami?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's
Yeah.
I've never been over to Okinawa, Japan, or anything, and so that's you know, on my bucket list of places to
I mean,
visit.
I think you'd like an Okinawan dojo because it's full of things to play with.
Yes.
You know, like we got a Senahan, and it's got the Congo Ken, which is a great big, like a safe, a paper clip, a massive iron paper clip, and they've got, you know, and they've got that the Tau, it's called a two, where you put your hand, a nucleate machine where you put it through. There's just loads of stuff, and
Yeah.
I mean, going back to the old days in Okinawa, people would do like they do like an hour or so of Hoji Undo, they do like an hour of Makiwara, and then they do kata. They did sanshin or nahanshi, and that would be it. But you know, there's anecdotal evidence where people trained in Okinawa, like Hiwana Sensei trained back in the day. They did Hoji Undo for the first hour.
Yeah, and that's sort of
it's really interesting, isn't it?
That's sort of what I do now. Is I try to get to the dojo maybe an hour and a half before I teach my class, and I do nothing but Hoji Undo before we actually do
like,
our.
You know, boxers skip. You know, boxers do road work. They skip before they do it. You know, before they put the gloves on.
And I think
it's not basic conditioning.
It's really important, like, because Simon, you said it before. I know, like there's people. The original dojos just used to be your backyard, right? And with a makiwara in one corner and some Hoji Undo, and then they do the kata. And I think it's interesting what you were saying before, Sal, about kind of like doing different exercises and 20 hours of training a week, or 6 of which are karate, right? But actually, like, I think people have gone too far into thinking that karate is anything other than just physical exercise. You know, like all karate is a well, karate is many things, but the big thing, I don't want to be slackful, but basically it is just a way to train your body on a very basic level, right? And as is doing weight training, as is the mace training, as is climbing. It's just one of those ways to train your body to give you that physicality that you can use your body as a tool through life, yeah. And I think people kind of mystify karate too much, and they've gone too far down the esoteric level. And that I often think you can get the same benefits doing tiddlywinks, or ping pong, table tennis, if you're completely devoted to that kind of skill set. Like I saw the world champion tiddlywinker, you know.
Tiddlywink, Michino Tiddlywink.
Yeah, but he was amazing.
Yeah,
just what he could do with his wink was.
Did he have a girlfriend?
Sure. That's your crowd. Yeah.
It's like it's traditionally a Michi following the way, isn't it? Yeah. Anyone who's good at anything has something about them because they've devoted that time to them. You know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But I think maybe, you know, what karate should be a celebration of physicality. I think it should be.
100%. I completely agree. And you know, anytime I'm doing non-karate activities, I treat it as this is still karate. When I'm climbing, I'm doing karate. When I'm doing yoga, it's karate training. It's all the same to me. I don't differentiate. It's all the same mindset, and you know, it makes it much more. I don't look at it as a chore. You know, some people look at they dread going to the gym, like, oh God, today's leg day. I got to do squats today, or I have to do, you know, it's such.
Yeah, but you're not fighting the weights, are you? You're not.
Exactly.
You're not. You see, that's the difference. You go something like you go in there to punish yourself.
Right.
You know, and then, but there are a lot of people like that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and like this, I still think there's a journey. We see this all the time, and I've been on that journey. Like, if you don't hurt yourself, you're not training properly.
Oh, that's
you know, that's if you come back from the karate dojo and you're bleeding and you're limping, that's a good session.
Yeah, I've been trying to make a lot. So I took over my dojo. I formally took over ownership of my dojo in 2016, and prior to that, we definitely had a culture of, you know, your belt test was going to be a few hours long, and it was going to be brutal. And you know, if you're testing for a brown belt or a black belt, we were going to make sure you threw up at least once while you were there. Yeah. I don't do that anymore. Like, I'm not there to hurt people. I don't want people, you know, when you had a belt test, I want you at your best, right? So you're going to know now exactly what's asked of you when you come in for your belt test. I want you tip-top shape. I'm not there to make you bleed or, you know, throw up or push you till you drop, sort of stuff. I'd rather you enjoy the practice. And you know, I think you can make good karate without killing yourself and injuring yourself. And you know, I see a lot of people who sort of came up through that era, and they're walking with a limp, and they've got so many just physical ailments. I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like, I want to be able to still do good karate when I'm in my 80s or 90s, and you know, not be nursing a bad knee.
No, I mean, I think, you know, that's exactly it. Exactly, and but you have to take responsibility for yourself. Sure. I mean, that's the important thing, because you know, old-fashioned Shotokan karate messes you up.
Absolutely.
Basically, that, you know, that's not heresy. That's you know, truth. So you know, you have to reach a stage where you say, I'm not going to do that, or you know, and you know, but you know, again, make karate right for your body. That's what I said. I said, make karate right for your body, but make your body right for karate. That's the quote.
Well said.
I mean, I think like that. I would argue the point about old style karate. I mean, I think arguably like old style European karate.
Oh yeah, no. If you go back to like, you know, the Kihon stuff or the Waseda stuff we saw, different.
But also I'd argue that even that old style European, like the old style European karate or whatever you want to call it, even that is right for a time. It's just like people don't progress. People who are in the 40s, 50s, 60s are still training like they're in the 20s and 30s, and there's no progression there. And I think it's like Rick Houghton nicely says, you know, the ultimate self-defense is taking care of your own body. And I think like so in Ireland, like everywhere, we're going through this vaccination process, and so it's age-based. So they're just at the moment they've just allowed like 40 to 45. So I was vaccinated, got my first dose last week. So it's 48-year-olds, you have to register on one day and then you all go. So basically when you went to get your vaccination, everyone in that queue was 48 years old. And I tell you what, I left that place with two happy thoughts. First happy thought was, I got my first dose of vaccination. Excellent. Second happy thought was, my God, I look good compared to everyone else.
That's great.
You could win a race with any of them.
Yeah, you know what? We were in the Aviva Stadium, which is a big sporting stadium, and we were at the top, and you had to walk down. I skipped down the steps, and everyone else was like just, you know, it was great. But like ultimately, like you have to be kind of looking after yourself and having that physicality,
I'm doing that, Sensei.
Everything in moderation, including moderation.
Yeah, that's really it. The only reason we train is so that we can keep doing this without putting on the weight.
True, it's true.
Yeah. So, okay, well, Simon says, last question. Any questions? Last question, Sal. Any questions?
No, I mean it's an absolute pleasure to me. And it's always nice to meet people who are all on the same page. You know, and I think I struggle with, like, I don't know. Sometimes I said to you a while ago, I hate karate. No, because I just hate that sort of miserable. You know, karate is this little box of, you know, I don't know, Japanese karate 1960 to 1972, That's karate. And any other way, you don't need to change it. It's a perfectly formed thing. And somehow it's disrespectful to change it. You know, we know someone who never did exercises before, never did press ups or sit ups or anything, because all he needed to do was karate. It was like the perfect thing, and it was a universal panacea for everything. You know, and he wasn't even very good, but I mean, and he actually was disdainful of hot, sweaty karate. I think he said to me, "Oh, you do hot, sweaty karate," and I went, "Yeah, I do." So, you know, I mean, I think I wrote down here, you know, playing with karate when I watched you, and I think that's a compliment, you know. And I think
yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, I think it's just a fun way to approach things. It's not.
It's taking ownership. We talk about this all the time. It's taking ownership, and also, like you say, now you don't really care. I mean, you know, what you know about anything, what other people think, because you're on your own journey, and that's it. And like, you know, I said, if you're moving from your center, you're probably okay. You know, because we always talk about that. You know, lots of people don't care in the crap because they're living in their own false world. But if you know, if you're moving on that, if you work on that principle, you know, you're okay.
Yep, absolutely.
So I mean, you obviously you're still self-critical, aren't you?
Absolutely. Oh yeah. I mean, and I've been, you know, as you've probably seen, I put a lot of content online. I've been recording myself since 2005, I think.
Yeah. I mean, that's really putting it out there as well. That's really brave, you know.
But a lot of that came from, you know, not having a sensei, and I needed some way to sort of see how I was doing and be able to watch myself. And so now I can go back and look at things I put out like in 2007, like, oh God, what, you know, I see so many things that are wrong, but you know, it's you have to.
I mean, but you always want that. The minute, you know, the other quote is, the minute you think you're any good, you're finished.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's why Scott, you chose Steve Hubel, isn't it?
Yeah. It
helps keep that ego in check. It does.
Yeah, that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So cool. Well, gentlemen, should we have one last final kampai?
Kampai.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
This was really great. Thank you very much.